Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're looking at Pema Chödrön's Start Where You Are, a guide to compassionate living.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about using these ancient Buddhist teachings for our modern lives.
You got it.
So we're going to be talking about dealing with difficult emotions,
Right.
relationships, and just finding more peace in a world that can be pretty chaotic.
Absolutely. What I find so fascinating about Chödrön's book is how she takes these really old teachings and makes them totally relevant to our lives today. She's giving us a roadmap to happiness, but not by changing who we are,
Right.
but by uncovering this inner wealth that we already have.
Yeah. It's like she's saying, hey, you already have what you need.
Right here, right now.
Yeah, you just got to dust it off a bit and see what's there.
Exactly.
So one of the tools that she offers is this thing called shamatha vipassana meditation.
Okay.
Does that sound intimidating to you?
It does sound a little intimidating at first, but it's actually much simpler than you think.
Okay.
So all you got to do is focus on your out-breath.
Okay.
And when thoughts come up, and they will,
Yeah, always.
you just gently label them thinking.
Okay.
Just acknowledge them. No judgment or anything like that.
So just creating a little space between you and all the chatter that's always happening.
Exactly.
So that kind of brings us to one of those teachings that really made me tilt my head.
Okay.
Victory to others, defeat to myself.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does it sound like being a doormat to you?
Not at all.
Okay.
It's more about changing how we look at things.
Okay.
So embracing defeat means being open to our imperfections without beating ourselves up and celebrating the victory of others,
Okay.
It helps us break free from that ego that says, it's all about me.
So expanding our capacity for joy beyond our own little bubble.
Exactly.
Which leads us to this concept of bodhichitta.
Okay.
The awakened heart.
Yes.
What does that even mean?
So Chödrön describes it as having three qualities.
Okay.
Softness, which is compassion.
Okay.
Sharpness, which is wisdom.
Okay.
And openness, which is emptiness.
Now, emptiness might sound a bit bleak at first, but...
It's not really empty like a void or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's more about potential.
Like a blank canvas?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And bodhichitta isn't some distant goal.
Okay.
It's that innate warmth and tenderness that we all have.
Okay.
Tinged with a little sadness for the suffering that exists in the world.
One of the things that really helps me put things into perspective is this analogy that Chödrön uses.
Yeah.
She compares life's situations to passing memories.
Oh, like that amazing walk you took the other morning.
Yeah, exactly.
So vivid in that moment, but now it's just a memory.
Right. And it just reminds me that all those things that I stress about, all those little slights and frustrations, they're just these little blips.
Fleeting moments.
Right in the grand scheme of things.
That doesn't mean that we ignore challenges.
Right.
It's more about approaching them with a different mindset.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that leads us to this idea of turning poison into medicine, which Chödrön presents this framework of 3 objects, 3 poisons.
Yeah. It sounds intense.
It's intense.
It's actually a really helpful way to understand why we suffer.
Okay.
So it starts with the 3 objects,
Okay.
which are things we find pleasant, things we find unpleasant, and things we feel neutral towards.
Okay.
And then it's our reactions to these objects that cause us to suffer.
So it's not the objects themselves?
Not the objects themselves,
But
but
how we relate to them.
exactly. So pleasant things can trigger craving unpleasant things, aversion, and neutral things, ignorance.
And these are the 3 poisons.
The 3 poisons, the root of our suffering.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I love how she uses these images to kind of illustrate this.
Yeah.
Craving, being so fixated on a piece of chocolate cake that you miss the Grand Canyon right in front of you.
Oh, yeah.
And then aversion is being haunted by past arguments when you're in a beautiful place.
Right.
And ignorance is having a paper bag over your head.
Oblivious to the world around you.
Come on, take the bag off.
Exactly.
But here's the cool part.
Right.
She says that these poisons, when met with awareness, can actually become the seeds of virtue.
It's true.
So instead of just mindlessly reacting or suppressing our emotions, we can actually use them as opportunities to cultivate patience,
Right.
kindness, and understanding both towards ourselves and others.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. So it's not about avoiding the discomfort, but leaning into it.
Absolutely.
Which seems to be kind of a recurring theme here.
Yeah.
Which brings us to beyond good and bad, let the world speak for itself.
That sounds profound.
Sounds very profound.
So this is where Chödrön introduces this concept of being a Child of Illusion After Meditation.
Okay.
It's about seeing the world with, like, fresh eyes.
Okay.
Without judging everything as good or bad, right or wrong.
It reminds me of how little kids see the world.
Exactly, with that sense of wonder and openness.
And Chödrön connects this concept to the idea of the holographic universe, which is a scientific theory that suggests that the material world might not be as solid as we think.
Interesting. Tell me more.
Right. So this theory suggests that what we perceive as solid is actually more like a hologram.
Okay.
You know, vivid and detailed, but ultimately empty.
So our perception of the world as solid and separate could be an illusion.
Like mind blown.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Chödrön quotes a teacher who describes it this way.
Okay.
Everything you see is vividly unreal in emptiness, yet there's definitely form. What you see is not here, it's not here, it's both and neither.
Whoa.
Right?
That's a lot to unpack.
So becoming a child of illusion is about recognizing this emptiness while still appreciating the vividness of our experience.
It's about loosening our grip on our fixed ideas and perceptions and allowing the world to just speak for itself without imposing your own judgments on it.
That makes a lot of sense. Chödrön also mentions how even our thoughts about good and bad, happy and sad are impermanent, fleeting, like bird imprints in the sky.
And this impermanence is actually a source of freedom.
Okay.
It means we don't have to be trapped by our difficult emotions. They'll pass just like everything else.
So how do we integrate this child of illusion perspective into our daily lives?
That's a good question.
Because let's be real.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the drama of our own little worlds.
It is. And that's where making friends with our demons comes in.
Okay.
So Chödrön shares this amazing story about Milarepa, a Tibetan Buddhist yogi, who finds his cave overtaken by demons.
Oh, no.
So he tries everything to get rid of them.
Okay.
Teaching them dharma, getting angry, even surrendering. Nothing seems to work. Until he finally says to them, look, I'm not going anywhere, and it seems like you're here to stay, so let's just live together.
What happens?
Most of the demons vanish instantly.
Wow.
All except for this one particularly nasty one.
Okay, what does he do with that one?
He offers himself completely to the demon, saying, just eat me up if you want to. And that demon disappears too.
Wow.
It's such a powerful metaphor for how we relate to our own difficult emotions and the difficult people in our lives.
So by resisting our demons, we actually give them more power.
It's like trying to push a beach ball underwater.
Okay.
The more you push, the harder it fights back.
Yeah.
But if you just let it be, it naturally floats to the surface.
I like that visual.
Yeah.
So this idea of non-resistance really resonates with me. Speaking of embracing the uncomfortable, Chödrön brings up this practice called tonglen, which I have to admit initially seemed a little out there.
It can feel counterintuitive at first.
Yeah.
It involves breathing in suffering.
Hold on, breathing in suffering.
Either your own or the suffering of others. And breathing out relief.
Isn't that a bit masochistic?
It's not about seeking out suffering or wallowing in it.
Right.
It's more about expanding our capacity for compassion by leaning into discomfort.
Okay.
Rather than running away from it.
So acknowledging that suffering is present both within us and in the world around us.
Exactly, because let's face it, suffering is a part of life.
Yeah, nobody escapes it.
Nobody escapes it. Chödrön gives an example of feeling intense rage towards someone she calls Mortimer.
Mortimer.
Instead of suppressing her anger or blaming Mortimer, she breathes in that burning fury, acknowledging it fully, and then breathes out spacious relief. Imagining others who are feeling that same rage and offering them that same spaciousness.
Wow, so it's like transforming our own suffering into compassion for others.
Yeah, it's like saying, I see you, I feel you, you're not alone.
And that brings us to a concept that really made me rethink my relationships with those, shall we say, challenging personalities?
Oh, yeah.
In my life, it's the idea of befriending the Bengali tea boy.
The Bengali tea boy.
Okay, go.
I like that.
Tell me more.
Okay, so it's a metaphor for those people who just drive us crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Those who just push our buttons relentlessly.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
And Chödrön says, they're like tea boys who barge into your space.
Okay.
Head straight to your basement where you keep all your hidden stuff.
Oh.
Pick out something you'd rather not see.
Okay.
And say, hey, is this yours?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So they're basically forcing us to confront those aspects of ourselves that we've rejected.
Exactly.
Those parts we'd rather keep hidden away.
They act as mirrors reflecting back to us those qualities that we'd rather not face.
Okay.
And Chödrön argues that these people are actually our greatest teachers.
So those people who drive me up the wall are actually offering me opportunities for growth.
It's a mind-bending concept, but I can see how that could be true.
It is. It's like she's giving us permission to reframe those difficult relationships.
Yeah, and see them as opportunities for deeper self-awareness.
Absolutely. And think about it. Who are the Bengali tea boys in your life?
Ooh, that's a good one.
What are they reflecting back to you?
Yeah, that's something to ponder.
That's something to ponder. And speaking of challenging relationships.
Yes.
Chödrön shares a story about a young man who has his new leather jacket stolen in a bar.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and he's surrounded by the thieves, feeling totally powerless.
Okay.
And instead of confronting them or getting caught up in anger and resentment, he does something unexpected.
What's that?
He does tonglen for them.
He does tonglen for the people who stole his jacket.
He breathes in their suffering, their greed, their aggression, and breathes out relief.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know, right?
He doesn't get his jacket back.
No.
But he finds a sense of inner freedom.
Exactly.
It's a powerful reminder that compassion isn't about condoning bad behavior.
Right.
But about finding freedom from our own reactivity.
Yes.
It's about not letting those external circumstances
dictate our internal state.
Right.
It makes me wonder, how can I bring more of that kind of compassionate awareness into my own life?
That's a great question, and a perfect one to lead us into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore even more of Chödrön's teachings on navigating the ups and downs of life with greater clarity and compassion.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's go.
So we've been talking about shifting our perspective on challenging people and situations.
Yeah.
But what about those moments when we're really feeling the pressure, like the big squeeze?
The big squeeze.
It's so easy to get caught up in our own story.
Yeah.
Our judgments and criticisms.
Absolutely. Chödrön reminds us that even our confusion, those times when we feel lost and overwhelmed, those are actually opportunities to connect with that deeper reality of emptiness.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that our thoughts and feelings are like clouds.
Right.
They're constantly changing and passing away.
It's like realizing that you don't have to believe everything you think. That's pretty freeing.
It is. And when we see this, we don't get so caught up in our mental drama.
Right.
We find this sense of freedom from the tyranny of our own minds.
I like that.
Chödrön calls this shunyata protection.
Okay.
It's like dropping a precious lacquered wool that we've been holding onto so tightly, and suddenly we can see more clearly. We become more present, and we connect with something larger than our own limited perspective.
Yeah, and this all ties back to the idea of overcoming resistance, like we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about that story of Milarepa and the demons in his cave.
Right.
And how the more he resisted them, the stronger they became.
Exactly. That story is such a powerful metaphor for how we deal with our own difficult emotions and situations.
So Chödrön outlines 4 practices that can help us work with resistance.
Okay.
The first one is accumulating merit.
Accumulating merit.
Which is about shifting our focus from me to we.
It's about cultivating generosity and openness. Letting go of that self-centeredness that can keep us stuck.
Okay, and the second practice is confessing evil actions.
Now that sounds a little heavy.
Yeah, but it's not about wallowing in guilt or shame.
No, not at all.
Right.
It's about honestly acknowledging the ways that we've harmed ourselves and others.
Yeah.
It's about taking responsibility and having a genuine desire to change.
So it's like recognizing that we all make mistakes.
We all make mistakes.
It's okay. What matters is that we learn from them and try to do better.
Absolutely. And that leads to the third practice.
Okay.
Feeding the ghosts.
Feeding the ghosts. That sounds a little spooky.
It does sound a little spooky, but...
But it's really about befriending those parts of ourselves that we tend to fear or dislike.
Yeah, those sudden surges of anger or fear that seem to come out of nowhere.
So how do we feed these ghosts?
Chödrön suggests that we actually make a relationship with these ghosts, offering them a symbolic cake.
We're giving cake to our anger.
It's about acknowledging those difficult emotions without judgment.
Yeah.
Giving them space to exist without acting on them or repressing them.
So it's like saying, hey, I see you there, anger. I know you're a part of me, but you don't have to control me.
Exactly. And then finally, the fourth practice is offering to the protectors.
The protectors.
Which in Tibetan Buddhism are often depicted as these wrathful figures.
Okay.
They're there to shake us up, to wake us up from our complacency.
It's like having a personal trainer for your spiritual growth.
I like that.
Right, pushing you to go beyond your comfort zone.
Chödrön suggests that on an inner level, we can offer to these protectors by cultivating awareness,
Okay.
recognizing when we've lost our mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
and bringing ourselves back to the present moment.
So it's about calling on our inner strength and wisdom to guide us.
Exactly.
Which kind of brings us to this idea of surprise as a gift.
Surprise is a gift.
I love that frame.
It's so easy to get thrown off course by unexpected challenges.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Chödrön talks about these moments being like getting hit by a snowball.
Oh.
It stops your mind. It jolts you out of your habitual patterns of thinking.
And in those moments, we have a choice.
We do.
Right.
We can either go back to sleep, returning to our old habits of blaming and resisting, or we can wake up.
And how do we wake up?
We can use that moment of shock to connect with that ground of emptiness that's always present.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that even those unpleasant surprises can offer us glimpses of freedom and clarity.
It's like that saying, sometimes you have to get knocked down lower than you've ever been to stand up taller than you ever were.
I like that.
And those moments of standing taller often happen when we're facing life's biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Which brings us to teachings for life and death.
Teachings for life and death.
This is where those practices we've been talking about, like tonglen and befriending our demons, really come into play.
They do.
Right.
Yeah.
Helping us not only live more fully, but also face death with greater peace and acceptance.
Absolutely. Chödrön contrasts the stories of two friends, Jack and Jill.
Jack and Jill.
Both facing death.
Okay.
Jack surrenders to the process, letting go of his attachments and finding peace.
Okay.
Jill, on the other hand, resists clinging to life, which only intensifies her suffering.
So it's all about how we relate to impermanence.
Exactly.
Wow.
To the inevitability of change and loss.
It shapes our experience of life and death.
It really does.
It's like the saying, the only constant is change.
It's true. And Chödrön introduces 5 strengths that can support us in navigating these challenges.
Okay, what are those?
Determination, familiarization, the seed of virtue, reproach, and aspiration.
Okay.
And she emphasizes the power of aspiration.
Okay.
The voicing of our heartfelt wishes for greater compassion, wisdom, and the benefit of all beings.
So it's like setting an intention for growth and transformation.
Yes.
Even in the face of the unknown. I love that. That's so empowering.
It is. And speaking of empowerment,
yeah.
Chödrön also talks about loving kindness and compassion in the face of difficult karma.
Which can be a tricky concept.
It can be. She reminds us that karma isn't about punishment or reward.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that all our experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant, are opportunities for learning and growth.
So it's like that saying, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
But instead of trying to figure out the reason,
right,
we can focus on what we can learn from the experience.
Exactly. And she tells this funny story about a head of lettuce being reborn in a vegetable garden.
A head of lettuce.
Lamenting that it wanted to be a wildflower.
Oh, no.
It highlights how we often resist our present circumstances.
Yeah.
Wishing things were different. But those very circumstances, Chödrön argues, are offering us the teachings we need to evolve.
So instead of getting caught up in blame or self-pity, we can ask ourselves, what can I learn from this situation? How can I use this experience to cultivate greater compassion and wisdom?
It's a much more empowering approach, for sure.
Absolutely. And speaking of feeling empowered, how do we stay positive? Or, as Chödrön says, lighten up? When life feels heavy and we're facing all these challenges and setbacks.
Chödrön reminds us that joy isn't about denying our pain or forcing ourselves to be cheerful all the time.
Okay.
It's about finding a sense of lightness and ease, even in the midst of difficulty.
So it's about choosing to focus on the good, even when things are tough.
Absolutely. Like that saying, your mind is a garden. Your thoughts are the seeds. You can grow flowers or you can grow weeds.
We want to grow flowers.
We want to grow flowers.
Right.
Exactly. And Chödrön encourages us to cultivate curiosity.
Okay.
To pay attention to the beauty around us and to appreciate the simple things. She also suggests shaking things up when we're feeling stuck.
Okay.
Breaking free from our habitual patterns.
So taking a step back, getting out of our heads and reconnecting with a sense of playfulness and wonder.
Exactly. It's like she's giving us permission to be kids again.
I love that. And speaking of playfulness,
Chödrön
tells this funny story about a woman who was known for being gloomy and irritable. But when she got cancer, something shifted.
Really?
She started to cheer up, appreciating the simple joys of life.
Wow.
Even on her deathbed, surrounded by her grieving family.
Yeah.
She couldn't understand why they were so unhappy.
Wow.
She died laughing.
That's amazing.
It's a reminder that even in the face of death, we have the capacity to choose joy, to choose lightness.
Such a powerful story.
It really challenges us to re-examine our priorities and focus on what truly matters.
What truly matters?
Speaking of what truly matters, Chödrön brings up this teaching that really challenges our attachment to outcomes.
Okay.
Abandon any hope of fruition.
Abandon any hope of fruition.
That sounds pretty radical.
It is. It's about letting go of our need to control how things unfold.
So it doesn't mean giving up on our goals.
No, not at all.
But recognizing that true freedom comes from releasing our attachment to specific outcomes.
Right.
It's about surrendering to the flow of life, trusting that things will work out as they should.
It's easier said than done. But
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I can see how it could be incredibly liberating.
It's like that quote, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
It's true. Chödrön shares a personal story about receiving a harsh letter from a friend.
Oh, no.
And how she initially felt hurt and angry, even starting to compose a dharmic letter in her mind.
Oh, using the teachings to defend herself.
Yeah, exactly. But then she had an experience that shifted her perspective.
Okay.
She felt intense loneliness herself, and in that moment, she understood where her friend's anger was coming from.
So instead of responding defensively, she reached out with kindness and understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful example of how dropping our need to be right to fix things can open us to a deeper level of compassion and connection.
I love that. And this leads us to a really important section of the book.
Okay.
Compassionate action.
Compassionate action.
It's all well and good to talk about compassion.
Right.
But how do we actually bring these teachings into our daily lives?
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle of everyday life and forget about all this spiritual stuff.
So how do we actually do it?
So Chödrön emphasizes the importance of communication,
Okay.
particularly communication from the heart.
Okay.
She tells a story from Dr. Seuss about two people walking toward each other on a narrow road,
Okay.
each refusing to step aside, becoming more and more entrenched in their positions.
Oh, no.
So they spend their entire lives stuck in this standoff, never considering that they could simply communicate and try to understand each other's perspectives.
It highlights how clinging to our own opinions
Really?
and seeing things as right or wrong can prevent us from connecting with others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy?
Sometimes letting go of our need to be right is the key to finding peace and connection.
It's true. And Chödrön also tells the story of the sneetches.
The sneetches.
Those creatures who are divided by whether or not they have stars on their belly.
Oh, yeah, I remember that story.
And this clever entrepreneur comes along and exploits their desire for status, creating machines to both add and remove stars.
Oh, no.
So the sneetches become obsessed with these external markers of identity running back and forth between the machines.
They don't know who's who anymore.
And eventually they're all mixed up. They don't know who's who anymore.
Right.
They have to learn to see each other without those labels, without those judgments.
It's a powerful reminder that true connection comes from recognizing our shared humanity.
Yes.
From seeing beyond our superficial differences.
And that leads us to a challenging but essential teaching.
Okay.
Train without bias.
Train without bias.
Chödrön challenges us to cultivate a mind that is free from prejudice and clinging to our own beliefs.
So it's about recognizing that everyone, regardless of their background, their beliefs, or their appearance, deserves our compassion.
Exactly. And she encourages us to use tonglen to work with our biases.
Okay.
Breathing in the suffering that arises from our judgments and breathing out compassion and understanding.
And she also suggests extending this practice to those we tend to ignore or overlook.
The neutrals in our lives.
Yeah, so expanding our circle of compassion to include all beings.
All beings, even those who we might not initially feel drawn to.
That's a good one. And that brings us to the big squeeze.
The big squeeze.
Those situations in life that just push our buttons and trigger our insecurities.
This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to be compassionate when everything's going smoothly.
Totally.
But what about those times when we're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or challenged?
That's when our true colors show.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And Chödrön emphasizes that it's in these moments of discomfort, when we're feeling squeezed,
Yeah.
that we have the greatest opportunity for growth.
It's like that saying, the obstacle is the path.
It is. She tells a story about a hermit who's been practicing patience in his cave for 20 years.
20 years.
And then along comes this teacher who starts challenging the hermit's ideas about patience, suggesting that maybe he's just seeking admiration.
Oh, no.
And, of course, the hermit gets angry, proving the teacher's point.
It's like our egos tend to cling to those qualities that make us look good. Those ideas about ourselves that we want to believe.
It highlights how we often use spiritual practices to bolster our self-image.
Yeah.
Rather than to genuinely transform ourselves.
So true patience, true compassion
Yeah.
arises not from clinging to a certain image of ourselves, but from a willingness to face those aspects of ourselves that we'd rather keep hidden.
Exactly. It's about being willing to be vulnerable, to be seen as we truly are, even when it's uncomfortable.
And she shares another story about the Buddha just before his enlightenment.
Okay.
Being bombarded by temptations, doubts, and fears.
Wow.
It's like all the forces of resistance are trying to pull him away from his path.
Yeah.
But the Buddha holds his seat, remaining open to whatever arises, refusing to be swayed by those distractions.
And in that moment of unwavering presence,
yeah,
he attains enlightenment.
It's a powerful reminder that true freedom comes not from avoiding discomfort, but from being fully present with it.
Absolutely.
And Chödrön emphasizes that we don't have to be enlightened to practice this way.
No, we don't. We can start right now in this moment.
Okay.
By noticing when we're feeling squeezed, when our buttons are being pushed.
And instead of reacting habitually, we can pause, take a breath.
Take a breath.
And ask ourselves, how can I use this experience to learn and grow? How can I use this discomfort to cultivate greater compassion and wisdom?
It's a completely different way of approaching those challenging moments that inevitably arise in life.
Absolutely. And this leads us to some really helpful advice that Chödrön offers.
Okay.
Don't expect applause.
Don't expect applause.
It's so easy to get caught up in wanting recognition for our good deeds.
Right.
For our efforts to be compassionate and kind.
It's like we're seeking validation for our spiritual growth.
Yeah.
But Chödrön reminds us that when we practice these teachings, when we open our hearts and offer our compassion, it's not about getting something in return.
Okay.
It's about acting from a place of genuine care without expecting thanks or praise.
So true compassion is its own reward.
Exactly. It's not about getting a pat on the back. It's about making a positive difference in the world.
And she warns against idiot compassion.
Idiot compassion.
Those well-intentioned actions that are actually motivated by a desire to control or fix others.
It's about recognizing that true compassion requires us to let go of our agendas and allow others to be who they are, even when it's difficult.
So she offers 3 key guidelines for practicing compassionate action.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, see neurosis as neurosis.
See neurosis as neurosis.
Recognize those habitual patterns of thinking and behaving that cause suffering.
So it's about being aware of those patterns, both in ourselves and in others.
Right.
And not getting caught up in them.
Second, do something different.
Do something different.
Break free from those old patterns of reacting.
Instead of reacting habitually, choose a different response.
Okay.
One that is more aligned with compassion and wisdom.
And finally, make that a way of life.
Make that a way of life. Integrate these teachings into our daily lives. Not just as practices we do on the meditation cushion, but as a way of being in the world.
It's about embodying these teachings.
Embodying the teaching.
Making them a part of who we are, not just something we do.
Absolutely.
I love that. That's so inspiring. And speaking of inspiration, Chödrön talks about the importance of the spiritual friend.
A spiritual friend.
Someone who can guide and support us on our journey.
Right.
And she offers a rather unconventional perspective on the role of the spiritual friend, saying the role of the spiritual friend is to insult you.
To insult you.
I know it sounds a bit harsh.
That does sound a little harsh.
Aren't spiritual friends supposed to be all loving and supportive?
Well, it's not about being intentionally cruel or anything like that.
Okay.
It's more about challenging us to see our blind spots. Those aspects of ourselves that we'd rather not acknowledge.
So like having a loving but honest friend who can tell you when you have spinach in your teeth?
Exactly. Chödrön describes her own experience with her teacher as feeling like the great expose.
The great expose.
Even when he said very little, she felt exposed.
Okay.
As if he could see right through her facades.
It's about having someone who can help us see ourselves more clearly, even if it's not always what we want to see.
Right. And she emphasizes that the spiritual friend isn't there to confirm our existence, to make us feel good about ourselves.
Right.
They're there to act as a mirror, reflecting back to us those areas where we're stuck, where we're holding ourselves back.
So it's about recognizing that true growth often comes from those experiences that challenge us.
Yeah.
That make us uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she shares a story about a young man who was judging his girlfriend for her struggles with smoking and an eating disorder.
Okay.
He was trying to be compassionate, but he just couldn't understand why she couldn't just be more disciplined, more strong.
It's easy to judge others when we haven't walked in their shoes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then he had a moment of insight. He heard himself saying the very words his girlfriend had been using. I'm trying. I'm really trying. I'm doing the best I can.
And in that moment, he understood her struggle.
He felt her pain.
And it humbled him.
It's a powerful reminder that true compassion arises not from judgment or advice giving, but from a willingness to step into another person's shoes to truly feel what they're feeling.
So it's about recognizing that everyone is fighting their own battles.
Yeah.
And offering support and understanding rather than judgment.
Absolutely. And that leads us to a beautiful teaching that Chödrön emphasizes in the final section of the book.
Okay.
Train wholeheartedly.
Train wholeheartedly.
This teaching encourages us to bring our full attention and commitment to the path of awakening.
Okay.
To embrace the challenges and the joys with an open heart.
So it's about showing up fully, giving it our all, not holding back.
Exactly. Chödrön uses the analogy of a baby bird learning to fly.
Okay.
It has to let go of everything, its nest, its parents, its fear.
Wow.
To take that leap into the unknown.
So it's about trusting the process, trusting ourselves even when it feels scary.
And she shares a story about a man who traveled to India 3 times to receive teachings.
Okay.
And on one of his journeys home, his companion, overcome with jealousy,
oh no,
throws all of his precious texts overboard.
Talk about a test of patience.
I know, right?
What happened? But when he returns home, he realizes that he doesn't need those texts.
Oh.
He's internalized the teachings. They've become a part of him.
It's a beautiful reminder that true learning isn't about accumulating knowledge,
right?
But about integrating wisdom into our very being.
It is. And that's what Chödrön is encouraging us to do.
Okay.
To train wholeheartedly to embrace the path of awakening with courage, compassion, and a sense of humor.
I love that.
It's about recognizing that the journey itself is the destination.
Yeah.
That every moment, every experience is an opportunity to wake up to the fullness of life.
So it feels like we've covered so much ground.
We have.
But what I really appreciate about Chödrön's approach is that
she doesn't just leave us with these big, profound ideas.
Right.
She gives us actual tools to apply them in our everyday lives.
Absolutely. One of the tools that stands out is her collection of slogans.
Okay.
They're like little reminders, little nuggets of wisdom that we can carry with us throughout the day.
They're like mini mantras for navigating those tricky moments.
Exactly. And she organizes these slogans into 7 points of mind training.
Okay, 7 points.
Which provide a framework for cultivating a more compassionate and awakened way of being.
Okay, so break it down for me. What are these 7 points all about?
The first point is instructions for the foundation.
Okay.
And it reminds us to start with the basics.
Okay.
Recognizing our own potential for goodness. It's about cultivating that basic trust in ourselves that we already possess the seeds of compassion, wisdom, and courage.
So, we're not starting from scratch.
We're not starting from scratch.
We all have this innate goodness within us.
Exactly. And the second point is instructions on relative bodhichitta, and it focuses on developing compassion for others.
Okay.
This is where practices like tonglen come in, helping us connect with the suffering of others and transform our own difficult emotions into compassion.
So it's about realizing that we're all in this together.
We're all in this together.
We're not alone in our struggles.
Right. And the third point is instructions on absolute bodhichitta.
Okay.
Which encourages us to connect with that deeper reality of emptiness.
Okay.
To see through the solidity of our thoughts and perceptions. It's about recognizing that everything is interconnected and impermanent.
So letting go of our fixed ideas and embracing the fluidity of life.
Exactly.
Okay.
The fourth point is transforming adversity into the path of awakening.
Transforming adversity.
Which offers practical advice for working with those challenging situations that push our buttons.
So that's where those slogans like drive all blames into one and be grateful to everyone come in.
Exactly. They remind us to take responsibility for our own reactions.
Okay.
And to see those difficult people as our teachers.
Shifting our perspective on those challenging moments and seeing them as opportunities for growth.
Absolutely. And the fifth point is instructions on dealing with distraction.
Dealing with distraction.
Which highlights the importance of mindfulness.
Okay.
Bringing ourselves back to the present moment when we get caught up in our thoughts or emotions.
So recognizing when we've wandered off course and gently guiding ourselves back.
Exactly. And the 6th point is disciplines of mind training.
Okay.
Which offers specific guidelines for living more ethically with greater awareness and compassion.
So aligning our actions with our values, living in a way that's consistent with our aspirations for awakening.
Absolutely. And then the 7th and final point is guidelines of mind training.
Guidelines.
Which encourages us to approach the path with wholeheartedness.
Okay.
To train without bias. Yeah. And to dedicate our practice to the benefit of all beings.
So recognizing that awakening isn't just about personal enlightenment, but about creating a more compassionate and just world for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate is that Chödrön reminds us that these slogans aren't meant to be taken as dogma or rigid rules.
Right.
They're invitations to explore, to experiment, to find our own unique way of embodying these teachings.
So bringing a sense of playfulness and curiosity to the practice.
Absolutely.
Allowing ourselves to make mistakes and learn from them.
Exactly. It's a lifelong journey, and there's no need to rush or to get it all figured out right away. The most important thing is to start where we are.
Yeah.
Meet ourselves with kindness and compassion, and to trust that we have the capacity to wake up to the fullness of life.
That's a beautiful message and a perfect way to end our deep dive into Pema Chödrön's Start Where You Are. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling inspired to take these teachings to heart.
Me too.
And see how they can transform my own life.
It's like she's giving us permission to be human.
Yeah.
To embrace our imperfections and to keep striving towards greater compassion and wisdom.
I love that. What about you, dear listener? What resonated most with you?
Yeah. Which teachings are calling to you, asking to be explored further? What stood out for you as you listened to our conversation?
As you go about your day, we invite you to ponder this one last thought.
Okay.
Chödrön reminds us that there's no escape, no problem.
No escape, no problem.
How can you apply that concept to something challenging in your own life right now? Maybe it's a difficult emotion, a frustrating relationship, or simply the feeling of being overwhelmed.
What happens when you lean into that discomfort instead of resisting it?
What might you discover about yourself, about the world, about the nature of reality itself?
We encourage you to dive deeper into Chödrön's book, Start Where You Are. It's a guidebook for navigating the complexities of life with greater compassion, wisdom, and courage.
Absolutely. And until next time, fellow deep divers, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep waking up to the beauty and mystery of this precious human life.
See you next time.